Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm Sam Albanese from the National Weather Service, and today's weather around the state featured high pressure over much of the mainland that resulted in generally clear cold conditions. Though we do have a blizzard warning in effect. It's not until tomorrow morning up along the eastern Arctic coast. Expect blizzard conditions tomorrow morning until Wednesday morning for that region, with some blowing snow advisory conditions over the eastern Brooks Range. Southeast Alaska had some windy conditions in their channel terrain, and some windy conditions were also occurring over the Alaska Range in the Delta Junction area. Taking a look at our satellite imagery, and we could see in the Bering Sea itself and into the mainland of Alaska, as we put the loop in motion, the high pressure is over the mainland, and there was a little bit of a disturbance aloft that went across the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta, and that brought some snow to those areas for the better part of the day today. Running that loop one more time, you can see this cloud mass moving down across the eastern Bering Sea to the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, north side of the Aleutian Islands. Basically, that's going to bring some showery type conditions into those areas. Taking a look now at the GOES satellite over the state of Alaska, and as you can see, generally clear conditions prevailed throughout the majority of the state. We had this bit of a cloud disturbance aloft moving across, and then there was low pressure up along that Arctic coast, and that was causing some snow and blowing snow conditions up there. And then, as you can see, in the Gulf of Alaska and Southeast Alaska, the low pressure system was down towards Haida Gwaii in that Dixon entrance area, and that was basically causing some clouds in the southern panhandle, but no real precipitation for the southern panhandle. Maybe a few showers were occurring there. Today's weather map, here's that low pressure system by Haida Gwaii. There was some rain in the Dixon entrance area south of the panhandle, but generally some cloudy conditions in the mid-panhandle regions with sunnier conditions to the north. Now, as you can see, there's a pretty tight pressure gradient here. This was causing some very strong channeled winds. In the southern panhandle, winds were gusting over 60 miles an hour. We're expecting wind chills to about 30 below tonight in that Chilkoot White Pass area, so very wintry-like conditions there. On the flip side of that, over the south central region, more benign type conditions, in fact very calm. The real issue was some foggy conditions in the inlet. Same thing for the Copper River Basin, generally clear cold conditions, calm conditions, although in the valley, as you would typically expect with these clear cold conditions, the fog and stratus does get trapped in there. Up towards the Arctic coast, we had this area of low pressure causing some snow. Over towards the eastern Arctic coast there, blowing snow as well. Over the Bering Sea, here's your big area of high pressure. This disturbance that I pointed out in the satellite imagery brought some snow across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coast, and then you can see the clouds and the general flow pattern out of the east and northeast across the majority of the Bering Sea. Not too windy and not much in the way of any real precipitation occurring there. Tonight, our low pressure system south of the panhandle basically dissipates. We do have this dissipated occlusion or trough extending from the main low pressure area that's well south of the Gulf. That's basically going to hold some clouds in the southern panhandle, clear, cooler conditions in the northern panhandle with the continuation of the wind and those wind chills to near 30 below up into the northern panhandle there. In the south central region, clear, calm conditions, although expect some fog mainly along the Cook Inlet region and in the Copper River Basin. Clear cold conditions across much of the interior, over into the northwest portion of the state, over the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound area. Initially, it's going to be somewhat cloudy, clearing out overnight, but there may be some patchy fog with flurries in those areas. Along the Arctic coast, this trailing cold front from that low pressure system will extend along the length of the Arctic coast. Some light snow or snow showers over the western Arctic coast, some snow over the Barrow area and the eastern Arctic coastal areas. You can expect some snow, not much in the way of accumulation, but blowing snow will be reducing visibilities and causing some problems in that area. Over into the Bering Sea and the Alaska Peninsula, strong northeasterly winds coming down to the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Expect snow showers, possibly even some blowing snow. A little bit warmer conditions as we get out over the central and western Aleutian Islands, where you can expect some rain and snow showers mixed in the overnight hours. Taking a look at the forecast now for Tuesday. Southeast Alaska, sunny in the northern panhandle, cloudier to the south. Windy conditions, basically those strong channeled winds, expected to continue throughout the panhandle as long as we have this high pressure over the Yukon Territory and low pressure in the Gulf. Not as strong winds as what we were seeing today. Some rain and snow showers are possible across Kodiak Island in this east flow that's going to be coming over the island across the Arctic frontal boundary. Snow showers along the Alaska Peninsula are also possible. North of the Arctic front, clear, cool conditions. Wind chills should be on the cool side, definitely for the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, even down to the Bristol Bay area. Northeasterly winds with low temperatures can be expected there. Up to the Arctic coast, as I said, we do have a blizzard warning Tuesday morning into Wednesday morning for the eastern Arctic coast. Blowing snow advisories along the eastern Brooks Range for tomorrow, and snow and blowing snow. Some snow showers over towards Barrow. Further to the west along the northwest Arctic coast, generally some cloudy conditions, but very benign compared to the eastern Arctic coast. Out over the Bering Sea, large area of high pressure, going to continue to see this east-northeast flow across the Bering Sea, and with that cold air, that typically generates showery type conditions, and in this case, along the Aleutian Islands themselves, expect some scattered snow showers for the day Tuesday. Now taking a look at the forecast for Wednesday. Southeast Alaska, definitely calming down compared to the last couple of days with those the next day or two, with stronger winds through the channel terrain, although in that northern panhandle still should be seeing some pretty strong northerly winds coming down through the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area. Along the North Gulf Coast, clear, cool conditions can be expected. A weak trough extending up into Cook Inlet. Expecting clear, cool conditions right now, but there's an outside chance we may see some cloud cover, which would help in keeping the temperatures a bit warmer. Clear, cool conditions throughout much of the interior right onto the Arctic coast. As you can see the theme here, high pressure is dominating the weather pattern over the mainland, as well as into the northern Bering Sea. Along the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutian Islands, low pressure south of the chain with the high pressure in the Bering Sea. You get your squeeze play going on there with your pressure gradient. Windier conditions across the Alaska Peninsula, some rain showers over the eastern Aleutian Islands, although there may be a mixture of snow in the morning hours, and a mixture of rain and snow showers over the central Aleutian Islands is what you should anticipate for Wednesday. Temperatures around the state today, southeast Alaska, generally on the cool side by southeast Alaska standards, in the low to mid 30s, 20 up into the northern panhandle. Along the North Gulf Coast, Yakutat didn't get plotted on the map, but they were into the 30s as well. 20s and 30s into Prince William Sound and the lower Cook Inlet region to the near 40 over Kodiak Island. You can see things cool down rapidly as you cross the coastal mountains, the Chugach Mountains into the Copper River Basin. Sub-zero readings at Glen Allen, 0 in the Eureka area. Up into the Tanana Valley, temperatures in the single digits above and below 0. The warmer conditions were, because of the windier conditions in the Delta Junction area, tends to keep your temperatures a little bit warmer. Up to the Arctic coastal area, temperatures much warmer than they had been the previous week. Temperatures in the teens and right around 10 above throughout the majority of the area. Same thing into the Kotzebue Sound area and Norton Sound, where you're seeing temperatures into the lower 20s. In the eastern, the western interior, temperatures, these are your highs today in the minus teens. Down to the southwest portion of the state, as you can see, the Bristol Bay region, temperatures in the teens and 20s, and warms up considerably as you move on across the Alaska Peninsula into the upper 30s. In the Pribilof Islands, right around 30 degrees. Dutch Harbor was at 37. Continuing along the Aleutian Islands, mid-30s to low 40s are what we were seeing there today. For our low temperatures for tonight, expect your temperatures in southeast Alaska to be on the cool side, mid-20s to low 30s, and in the teens up into the northern panhandle, up into the Haines-Skagway area, and of course up in the path, windy conditions with those kind of temperatures, wind chills 30 below most likely. Expect your temperatures to be cooling down over the south central region as they have been for the last couple of nights now, in the single digits below 0 into the Susitna Valley. in the 30 below range in the Copper River Basin, and as we move on up into the eastern interior, in the minus 20s prevalently expected in that area. The Arctic coastal portion of the state in the single digits below zero to single digits above. Single digits above zero over the Seward Peninsula, right on down to the Yukon Delta, the Kuskokwim Delta region. Temperatures inland about 10 below, 15 along the coast. Bristol Bay right around 10 degrees until you get further south towards Port Huyton in the 20s, 30s along the Alaska Peninsula as well as the eastern Aleutian Islands, and across the remainder of the Aleutian Islands in the mid-30s. Pribilof Islands expect your temperatures in the mid-20s. For tomorrow's highs, southeast Alaska, 20s and 30s are what you should anticipate on the North Gulf Coast, generally in the 20s to low 30s. Kodiak Island near 40. Things basically in the south central region, temperatures are going to be about the same as what they were today, although in the Cook Inlet region, maybe a few degrees warmer. In the eastern interior, generally about what we were seeing today, single digits above to single digits below zero there. Same thing along the Arctic coast, temperatures slightly below zero over the western Arctic coast, staying above zero to the east. Over the Bering Strait region, Seward Peninsula, single digits in the Kotzebue Sound side to the teens to the south. Same thing down to the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta along the coast in the 20s. Southwest Alaska in the teens and 20s in Bristol Bay, 30s across the Alaska Peninsula, 30s to the eastern Aleutian Islands, right at 30 in the Pribilof Islands, and the mid-30s are what you should expect across the Aleutian Islands for tomorrow's highs. Taking a look at our flying weather for tomorrow. Some marginal conditions in southeast Alaska, marginal to IFR, well, predominantly IFR conditions with those blizzard type conditions over the eastern Arctic coast, as well as blowing snow conditions along the eastern Brooks Range, IFR conditions there as well. Marginal conditions across the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutian Islands, as well as the majority of the Aleutian Islands. The Pribilof Islands may actually wind up in the marginal conditions. We'll just have to pay more attention to that tomorrow. Taking a look at the passes, Anaktuvik as well as Adigan Pass are both expected to be marginal conditions for tomorrow. VFR conditions for Lake Clark as well as Merrill Pass, Rainy Pass expect VFR conditions. VFR conditions for Windy Pass as well as Isabel Pass. Moving on down to the Mentasta VFR conditions. Now down to the Chugach Mountains. Tonita Pass expect VFR conditions as well as VFR conditions for Portage Pass. And over into Chilkoot and White Pass, expect VFR conditions, although you may see a little bit of turbulence with those strong northerly winds. Taking a look at our freezing levels for tomorrow. At the surface, over the majority of the mainland, as well as portions of southeast Alaska, to just off the surface in the southern Panhandle and the outer coastal areas, Kodiak Island and the Alaska eastern Aleutian Islands and the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutian Islands, right off the surface to about 1,000 feet. For tomorrow's icing, the only place that we're really expecting any icing is up over that northeast Arctic coast and the eastern Brooks Range, but only isolated moderate rime icing from your freezing level to about 10,000 feet. Taking a look at our jet stream for tomorrow, expect there's a northern branch of the jet stream coming across into northwest Alaska at about 115 knots, drops off to 60 knots as it goes through the northwest territories there. Then we also have a 130 knot jet coming off of Japan, accelerating to 170 knots south of the Aleutian Islands. Then it drops off to about 70 knots well south of the Gulf of Alaska and 105 knots as it makes landfall over the Washington coast there. Moving on down to the 9,000 foot level. Lighter winds expected at this level over southeast Alaska and the eastern mainland. Along the Arctic coast, basically about 35 to 40 knot winds over the northwest Arctic coast, 20 knot winds over the eastern Brooks Range, but right over the eastern Arctic coast, 45 knot winds there. 20 to 25 knot winds over the western interior, and that accelerates to about 35 knots as we get along the Bering Sea coast down to the Alaska Peninsula, with 25 knot winds up into that St. Lawrence Island area. Along the Aleutian Islands themselves and the majority of the Bering Sea, expect about 35 to 40 knot winds across those areas, dropping off to about 30 knots over the western Bering Sea as well as the western Aleutian Islands. Down to the 3,000 foot level, southeast Alaska, generally speaking, calm winds, although in the channel terrain you will see some stronger winds. Over the Arctic coast, 15 knot winds or so, 10 knots over the eastern Brooks Range. 15 knot winds over the northwest Arctic coast coming across the western interior, accelerating to 30 knots along that Bering Sea coast. 35 to 45 knot winds from the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutian Islands. Continuing along the Aleutian Islands, Expect about 30 knot winds over the central Aleutian Islands, down to 25 knots over the western Aleutian Islands, and across the Bering Sea about 25 to 30 knot winds is what you can expect there. For turbulence tomorrow, expect some isolated moderate turbulence up along that eastern Brooks Range with those stronger winds, ridgetop winds, causing the blowing snow conditions below 2,500 feet above ground level. Over into the Alaska Peninsula area, expect some isolated moderate turbulence below 2,500 feet across the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutian Islands. And though I left it off the map, you should expect some moderate turbulence up through the northern panhandle on that Chilcoot and White Path with those strong winds there. That wraps up this portion of the show. Enjoy the segment and come back for the marine forecast.
Good evening. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. Tonight we're going to welcome back Brian Leist. Brian is the owner of Flytech, which is a maintenance facility out on Lake Hood, and one I'm familiar with. And we're talking about winter flying. Brian has some really good ideas on the first program, and you should be able to go on the website and see that if you didn't get a chance to see it earlier. Brian, welcome back.
Thanks, Eric.
So, a couple of other questions. You actually mentioned something that another advantage of hangaring an airplane that some people might not have thought about, and that is when you're sumping the airplane. Talk a little bit about that, how that may be affected.
Well, typically in the summer time, the warmer climates, you're sumping your fuel tanks and you're getting your fuel, you're looking for water. When we get into the freezing temperatures, the water turns to ice, so therefore you're sumping and you may get fuel and the water's frozen, therefore you're sumping for really no reason. You're not going to see the water because it's ice. When you get it in the hangar and that ice thaws, then you're getting a true clarification of your fuel.
Different topic. What about, I mean, obviously the pilots watching know not to fly with any frost on the wings and surfaces or any ice, but what are some suggestions on how to get it off?
Well, of course, snow removal with brooms, gently, of course. You don't want to damage your leading edges. There are certain techniques. I've seen people use hair dryers, which is a long process. But the best thing to do is to keep your wings covered. Use wing covers, cover your tail surfaces as much as you possibly can.
What about ropes? I've seen people run ropes across the wings. Does that do any damage?
Ropes, you can use ropes carefully. There are a lot of people that have the micro vortex generators, and those you can pull those right off too. So if you don't have those, you can get away with the ropes if you're not afraid of hurting your paint job.
Let's talk about something completely different. How often should an airplane be flown? And if it can't be flown that often and the pilot or the owner makes the decision to pickle it, talk about that.
Well, ideally, if you can fly the airplane once a week, that's a pretty good deal for the airplane. Once a month might be all right, but at that point you're starting to develop some moisture in the engine. And if you don't think you're going to be flying for a few months, you might want to winterize the aircraft. And in doing that, you use these are desiccant plugs. This is what it looks like new. And then once they soak up moisture, they turn to this color. These can also, you can take these out, and the little beads in there, once they soak up moisture, you can put them in the oven and then turn them back into purple, and they're ready to soak up more moisture. For the engine itself, there's also Phillips 66 is a type of anti-rust oil that you can put in the oil system, cycle it around, and it'll help keep that moisture out. And then you want to plug all your holes, your exhaust and your intake, to keep all that moisture out.
So I will tell you from the voice of experience that when springtime comes around, I'll make sure you take those out and put the spark plugs back in.
Absolutely.
What about the battery?
The battery, a good idea to take the battery out, put it in your garage somewhere safe, then just keep it warm. Put it on a trickle charge every once in a while to keep it up there and usually that's all you really need to do.
Oh, Brian, got a bunch of questions, but we got about a minute and a half left. Any, and you own, and I've mentioned this manager, a really competent maintenance facility with some talented professionals. Tell me how you emphasize safety to your people.
Well, we use experience for the most part. All 6 of my mechanics that work for me are also pilots, so we share in our experiences. Our clients that come in have their own experiences. We listen to the safety topics that they bring in, what their concerns are, and it's a group effort. So every situation that we come up on, as you mentioned, now we're in the winter season, we're doing winter flying, we're talking about that, keeping everything warm, doing our preheating, doing a thorough walk around, look for the ice, all those things that are important as the seasons change.
Great. Brian, thanks for being on the program
Thanks,
tonight.
Harry.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program and the last program we had on winter flying. We all like to get out and fly on the nice days, but we do need to exercise a little bit of extra caution. I also want to take a minute to remind you that this program and the 2 safety seminars that we put on this last year were brought to you by the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, completely member supported. Please go to our website, www.aasfonline.org. It's on your screen there. And if you haven't renewed for 2015, please help us out so we can continue to bring programs like this to you. And until next time, fly safe.
Welcome back, and let's take a look at the ice edge before we get into our marine forecast. And over the Bering Sea, the ice edge really isn't moving a lot. It's kind of moved a little bit further to the south, but east-northeast winds and the temperatures of the water that it's going into are somewhat warm still, so we're not expecting any real dramatic growth in the ice over the next couple of days. Taking a look at southeast Alaska for Tuesday, north winds 30 knots coming down through Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay and the inside waters in the central Panhandle, with east-southeast winds 25 knots in those southern inside waters. Along the outer coastal waters, east winds 20 knots in the southern outer coastal waters to 15 knots off the Gustavus area, with 10 knots out of the east off of the Yakutat area in the east Gulf Coast there. And along the east Gulf Coast by Wednesday, expect those winds to increase to 30 knots there, 35 knot gale force winds off of the north end of the Gustavus area, 25 knot winds in the southern outside waters, 20 knot winds out of the southeast and the southern inside waters, with north winds 35 on up to 45 knots through the channel terrain of the central Panhandle, as well as up through that Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay area. Taking a look at the south central region for Tuesday, light and variable winds around Prince William Sound and just off the coast of Prince William Sound. Northeast winds 10 to 15 knots coming down Cook Inlet to the Augustine area, 15 knot northeasterly winds south and east of the Barren Islands, and northeast to east winds 25 knots across the Kodiak Island waters for Tuesday. By Wednesday, we'll see the winds increasing to northeast 15 knots out of the Sound to northeast 20 knots south of the Sound, northeast winds 20 knots across Kodiak Island, and northeast winds 25 knots in the southern Cook Inlet region to the Augustine area. Still north winds around 10 knots in the northern inlet, and northeast winds 15 knots south and east of the Barren Islands. For your Alaska Peninsula waters on Tuesday, expect your winds generally to be out of the northeast throughout the entire region. 30 to 35 knot winds south of the Alaska Peninsula, with 25 to 30 knot winds from Bristol Bay to north of the western Alaska Peninsula. Taking a look at the area for Wednesday, expect your winds to remain out of the northeast, 25 to 30 knot winds along the north side of the Alaska Peninsula to Bristol Bay, 25 to 30 knot winds as well on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. For the Aleutian Islands, expect your winds to be out of the northeast across the entire area, except for the extreme western Aleutian Islands, where the winds will be east around 30 knots. Northeast winds 30 knots over the central to western Aleutian Islands. Northeast winds 30 to 35 knots over the eastern Aleutian Island region. Taking a look at the area for Wednesday, expect your winds to remain out of the northeast across the entire region now. Still easterly winds out over the western Aleutian Islands at 25 knots there, 30 knots over the central Aleutian Islands, and 30 to 35 knot winds over the eastern Aleutian Islands. For our Bering Sea coastal waters on Tuesday, expect your winds to be northeast across the entire area, 15 knots up into the St. Lawrence Island area to 20 knots across the St. Matthew Island waters, 25 to 30 knot winds off the Nunivak Island region with 35 knot winds over the Pribilof Islands. Taking a look at the area for Wednesday, still northeast winds across the entire region, about 25 knots through the majority of the area except in the St. Lawrence Island region where you can expect the winds to be out of the northeast 15 knots. For the Arctic coastal waters on Tuesday, expect your winds to be out of the northeast to north along the northwest Arctic coast to outside of Kotzebue Sound at about 15 knots. West to northwest winds 20 knots over the Barrow region with 25 knot winds over by Prudhoe Bay and over towards Kaktovik. Expect your winds to be out of the west at 40 knots for Tuesday. By Wednesday, those winds drop off to 30 knots, 20 knot winds in the Prudhoe Bay area, variable winds around 15 knots over the Barrow region, and expect your winds to be out of the east 20 knots over the western Arctic coastal waters and south to variable winds 10 knots outside of Kotzebue Sound. Taking a look now at the forecast again for tonight. Expect some blowing snow conditions along the Arctic coast. By morning, expect blizzard conditions over that eastern Arctic coast, and those blizzard conditions will persist into Wednesday morning for snow and blowing snow there. Also some snow and blowing snow along the eastern Brooks Range by the morning hours. Clear, cold, calm conditions over much of the interior portions of the state. Some foggy conditions in the Copper River Basin and the Cook Inlet region. Flurries and fog over the St. Lawrence Island region to the Norton Sound area. Some snow showers across the Alaska Peninsula. Southeast Alaska, generally just cloudy conditions. Taking a look at the forecast again for Tuesday. Somewhat cloudy conditions persisting in the southern panhandle. Windy, cold conditions, low wind chills in that northern panhandle. Up along the northeast Arctic coast, expect blizzard conditions over the eastern Arctic coast with blowing snow conditions over the eastern Brooks Range. But we're out of time for the show this evening. Thank you for watching and have a good evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.